Hello and welcome back to your first subs in Unity. Last time we created our player controller with the ability to jump and made our level move to the left. This time we are going to talk about trigger and how we can achieve that our collectibles are collectible. With that said, let's jump right in. Right now our collectible works pretty much the same way any obstacle does. It has a box collider and a sprite renderer, and that's basically it. We don't have any specific logics beside, of course, the animation. Now, if we want to change this behavior, that something happens once we collide with it, so we enter the collision bounds, we need to change the uh, collectible itself. Now let's focus on it for a second. The inside, and inside the box collider there is an option called is trigger. This is used to create this specific event whenever we hit a rigid body. Now, as you might remember, our player has a rigid body, so once the player is triggered, since it's collided with the bounce, everything is okay and we want to create an event. And to do that, we need to create a simple C# script. Call it collectible maybe. Apply it to the inside object and start changing the script. Now the standard methods aren't needed right now because we don't want to do anything in update or in the start. So we can simply use the method provided by Unity for this specific kind of event, which is on trigger enter to D. Now we could also use exit and stay for specific other situations, but in our case we want the second our player enters the bounds to do something. Now this is the method and it's called whenever we enter the bounds. So it has one variable which is the collider 2D, which is the object we are colliding with. So this can be a player, this can be anything. So the first thing we need to do is basically verify that we are actually colliding with the player object. And we usually do this by comparing the tag. Compare tag, that's a function to verify we have the same, or we have the tag we want, which can be player, for example. Now the player tag is something that is provided by us, by Unity, with every game. We always have the player tag. So we can simply select our player and apply the tag up here as the player. We could also create our own tags, but we don't need that at the moment. So we simply use the player tag and verify that we are colliding with the player. And to check on that, let's go with debug log, and I collided with the player. So whenever the collision is detected, we want to write this statement. So let's duplicate our little obstacle, which has the changes already inside, and move it to the side so we can verify that. Let's hit play. And now since the obstacle is moving up and down, the console, every time it's reaching the player, it's writing I collided with the player, which is exactly what we want. Now, this is only the first step. We still need to apply real logic to it. And for that, we should maybe create a game object which holds the score. So we can increase the score every time we collide with an obstacle. And what better game object would there be than the player itself who can hold the score? So let's simply change the player controller script, added another variable, a public int score, and we can now store it. Now, if we want to change the value, we can't rely on user input. We want to change it through a script. So we have to create a possibility for the collectible itself to change this value. To do that, we can simply go into the collectible and change the way the collision detection work, or the action which is called in the collision detection. Now, the collision can simply get any component from the game object it's colliding with. So I can simply go with the player controller to get the component on the collision object of the type player controller. So this object collides with the player, checks if the player has the tag player, then loops through all options or components and gives us the one with the type of player controller. And here we can now simply change our score. Now in a real situation, we would usually verify that our score is really accessible. Maybe we don't have the player controller script through a bug or whatever. But in our case, since we checked for the player, I think this is good enough. Now we want to destroy the game object because otherwise we would simply increase the score every time we collide with the player and, well, keep increasing it. In reality, we would usually want to increase it once and then remove the collectible so we know, oh, that's gone and we can now go on to the next one. So to do that, we have to use the destroy method, which destroys a game object. Now, if we simply use the game object we are attached to, which would be like this, we would destroy the inside game object and not the complete prefab in our case. So if I start it, the inside is will collide, will be destroyed, and then we still have the outside shell. Just demonstrate it real quick. We only collide once, and we still have the collectible sitting here, the shell. Now, if you want to access the outer shell, we can simply use our transform to scale through the different transforms. So from this one, the parent is the collectible shell, and from this one, the parent is the collectibles container, and from this one, it would be level. So from our inside, or most inside in this case, which calls the function, we want to verify that we have not the game object we're currently attached to, but the parent game object. And to do that, we can go with transform dot parent dot game object. Now the parent gives us a transform type, and every transform is attached to a game object, as well as every game object is attached to a transform. So they link to each other. And from our transform, we can simply traverse the tree and destroy our shell. So now the 4, once it's collided, increases the score once. It's pretty fast, so we can't really see it. The score is at 1. We locked it once, and it's now completely gone. So this is the behavior we want to create, and we can now quickly comment this out, and we are basically done. Now the player controller is already attached on the inside here. On the inside here. And now we only have to change all of our prefabs to do exactly the same. So once I hit apply and verify that our collectible 2 now has the collectible as well, everything is fine. Now that our collectibles are basically done, we can simply delete our test collectible, move over to our goal, and apply the same logic to it we used before. So we make it a trigger, create a simple C# script. Let's call it goal, and attach it to our goal game object. So now here we can use our on trigger entity method, verify that our collision is really with the player, and now we can add logic to this situation. One thing I like to do is create something like a freeze screen, and to do that we can simply change the time scale to 0, which means that normally time passes at the scale of 1. So for every second that passes, our game time passes by 1 as well. Now we say for every second that passes, time doesn't pass at all. So every animation, every moving to the left, every moving to the right, every whatever we are doing isn't moving at all since we multiplied everything with the time.delta time. This is simply 0 from that point on. So if we change to a level, start it, jump a bit, fail to collect any collectible, and hit our goal, simply everything stops. Now that every building block as well as their functionality is in place, we only need to verify that our level is indeed playable. I ended up changing a few different things, like the movement speed of the level, the general positioning of these obstacles as well as their collectibles, and the camera size to feel a bit closer to the action. But keep in mind that for your level, this could be totally different, and the only important part is that you have to test what you are creating, because otherwise you might end up creating an unsolvable situation and your players get frustrated. I think that's it for this episode. We talked about the trigger capabilities of the Box 2D collider, verified with what we are colliding through the tag, and even accessed a component of the collision object, in our case to increase the score. Now, the next episode will be the last in the series, and we will be focusing on the user interface. If you have any questions left, always feel free to comment. I'll do my very best to answer them as quickly as possible. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.